Welcome to the Innovation Brief, the podcast where we have real conversations with leaders driving meaningful change across diverse sectors. I'm Will Benton.
And I'm Gabby Hernandez. Each episode, we bring you insights from innovators who are shaping the future through bold ideas, fresh perspectives, and transformative work.
Today, we're joined by Aneta Londa, founder and chief buzz creator at Moonshot Pirates, a global movement that empowers the next generation of changemakers.
Aneta is building one of the world's most accessible impact accelerators for young innovators, connecting thousands of young people across 160 countries with more than 500 experts to tackle real-world challenges. With over a decade of experience in impact entrepreneurship, branding, partnerships, and youth empowerment, she's on a mission to equip young minds with the skills, mindset, and network to shape a better future. She also serves on the South by Southwest board, is a proud mum to a little pirate, and believes deeply in kindness, nature, and bold ideas that change the world.
So whether you're an entrepreneur, policymaker, corporate leader, or simply curious about the future of innovation, this conversation will give you a fresh perspective on how bold ideas, emerging technology, and human creativity can come together to make a real difference. So Aneta, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Gabby and Will. What a wonderful introduction. Yeah, happy to be here.
To begin, can you please share us the story behind Moonshot Pirates, like how you got started?
Absolutely. So actually, together with my co-founder, Marco, we started Moonshot Pirates back in 2019 in a small Austrian village where we brought together 30 young people with 15 mentors, what was essentially a simple entrepreneurship bootcamp. You can call it that way. Nothing fancy. It was actually an old parish that had workshop rooms and places to sleep. So we were a jackpot. It's nearly for free. Let's do that. And yeah, we did that. And the desire was really to bring entrepreneurship closer to young people, especially those that perhaps didn't grow up around it. Because both of us founders, we come also from not very entrepreneurial backgrounds, but we were both lucky to have lived in Silicon Valley, where we were influenced with this, bold moonshot thinking. We both followed places like Singularity University, and we simply kept asking ourselves, why should this bold thinking be accessible to people in certain geographies or network? But even back then, when we started, we didn't just want to run another, youth startup program. What we had here was a bit of a bigger ambition to really build like a movement of young people who use entrepreneurship and innovation as a tool to tackle global challenges, from climate to food to inequality, education, you name it. So not like creating startups for the sake of startups, but really creating ventures that actually matter. And we had that first bootcamp in 2019 in Tainach, a little village in Carinthia. And after these 3 days, we had young people coming to us telling us, oh my God, I have learned more about myself in these 3 days than in 13 years in school. And that's really when it kind of clicked for us. What we saw during those 3 days was really when you give young people, the space, the trust, and help them maybe discover what they are passionate about, what problems do they want to solve, what problem do they genuinely care about, they go completely wild. They stayed up until 5 a.m. in the morning. They, probably had some energy drinks, which is not that healthy. I'm not encouraging that fun. But what they did, they really, during those 3 days, they took ownership. They started to build, they test, they failed like some in the last couple of hours that they had to pitch. They were like, we are completely scrapping that idea and we are creating it from new. What we gave them was this real experience. Instead to just listen to a keynote on entrepreneurship or innovation, they actually experienced that. They started to build, they connected to mentors, experts. And what I think shifted for them was that finally someone believes in us and I can actually change something in this world. And we were running those bootcamps for like 2 years and then COVID hit. Yay. So we're like, oh my God, we are probably screwed here. We have two options. We either stop Moonshot Pirates, we pause for a bit, we don't know how long that's going to take, or we go global. which was anyways or always our goal to create this global movement. So we moved everything online, and suddenly, geography basically didn't matter anymore. So what started with these 30 young people in a small Austrian village really grew into a movement. We now work with nearly 20,000 young people in 160 countries. And yeah, we keep on rolling.
What a cool story. I mean, you kind of touched on it with the relationship you had with the Silicon Valley kind of environment and that driving innovation and making that more accessible. But was there a particular or singular personal experience or moment that kind of pushed you to dedicating your career to empowering young change makers? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of moments that shifted that. You can probably pick just one, but I'll try. I kind of took a very traditional path, you can say. I grew up in Czech Republic, which is as you might know, the post-communist, country. So really an environment that is not fully supportive of entrepreneurs and definitely not impact entrepreneurs as we know them. And, the rule was kind of you work hard, you get good grades, you find a stable job, and you live happily ever after. So that's what I did, kind of. I was a good student, I had good grades, I got to a good university. In the end, I ended up in a very well-paid job, traveled a lot, So from outside, everything looked wonderful and right. But for me, internally, something felt a bit off. So I realized that, I was helping yet another company to sell more products into a world that already consumes a lot. And I couldn't really connect that to my personal values. And I had kind of this maybe moral ambition in me, that feeling that I should be contributing to this world in some more meaningful ways. And that was really not happening through the job or through the path that I chose at the beginning. So I was 28 years old and on a very edge of a big burnout. So I took some time off. And during that time, I remember a friend of mine asked me a very uncomfortable but simple question. And that question was, what's your dream? And I just found myself, I really struggled, to answer that question. At 28 years old, I didn't have a clarity on what I actually want to maybe build or give to this world. And I think that was a very important moment in my time. And I really took some time to figure it out. I'm still figuring it out, don't take me wrong, but that kind of pushed me on that path to always question, where you are at and if you are using your skills and knowledge in the best possible way. And at the time also, which was super important, I think, and it was kind of the beginnings of Moonshot Pirates, I joined a organizing team of a TEDx event in Austria. And suddenly I was surrounded by people that were building incredible things, scientists, entrepreneurs, innovators, you really name it. But what struck me the most was they were just simple humans. They were no superhumans, they were just like you and me, completely normal people. And the difference wasn't that they were, super intelligent, like some of them were, most of them were, but the difference there, I think, was an access to networks, to the right opportunities. So we kind of, together with my co-founder, thought, what if you didn't have to, let's say, live in Silicon Valley, or stumble into the right network when you were 28, 30, 35 in our points of life. But what if young people, no matter where they grow up, had early access to the community, to mentors, to this big thinking, and to have a space where they can simply experiment, try, fail, and learn. And it, took me nearly 3 decades to kind of start to articulate my own dream. And I just didn't want that the next generation has to wait that long.
I mean, through your work with Moonshot Pirates, you're working with so many different young people from all across the globe. What has consistently kind of surprised you or inspires you about the younger generation? And what are some things that you've learned from them?
I honestly think that we consistently underestimate young people. There is still this narrative that we as adults need to prepare young people, for the future. But when you actually spend time with them, and I spend quite some time with them, you are realizing that they are actually already living in that future. They are true digital natives, they use the latest tools super intuitively. I've seen 17 years olds building and coding prototypes in just a few days, building AI tools, launching communities from, their, I don't know, schoolroom or during the break. And while we think that we need to kind of teach them innovation or entrepreneurship, in many ways they are already like super ahead, right? So that's definitely one thing. Another thing that I would say that really inspires me about this generation, and especially about the young people we work with at Moonshot Pirates, it's this kind of, you can call it a moral ambition. When you look around, those young people are demanding, workplaces that are having a purpose. They demand businesses that prioritize maybe planet and people over profit. They are also a highly entrepreneurial generation, and they are really aware of the problems we have around the world, from climate, inequality, mental health, you name it. So this generation, I feel it's super hungry for change. So maybe my kind of learning, I would say, or something that I took from them, was that be simply more courageous. They are often willing to come and question the system that we have built. They are less attached to, oh, we have always done this way. They are more willing to change the status quo than maybe older generations.
It's interesting in terms of that progression or that democratization, at least on the technology side of things. You were talking about it earlier in terms of the inspiration for starting, but can you kind of talk us through how you and the team at Moonshot Pirates have worked towards lowering the barrier to entry for impact innovation, especially for your audience, in the sense of how it's not lacking for ideas in young people today, but potentially access and having that voice to be heard?
Yeah, so for us, it's more about how can we remove, this intimidation feeling, the intimidation factor of things. So at Moonshot Pirates, first of all, everything is free for young people, That was kind of the non-negotiable for us since we started at the beginning of Moonshot Pirates. We just said, hey, the programs, the access to the community should be free for young people wherever they are. Because if access depends on money, we are already excluding those that actually need it the most, right? But beyond the financial side of things, at Moonshot Pirates, it's really about how we show up. Like, one thing, we don't use complicated language. We don't expect young people to have super duper polished pitch decks from the day one. They don't even have to have an idea in order to join. We really help them to go through that process. So I would say curiosity and willingness is enough to start at Moonshot Pirates. And another thing is, when they join one of our programs, is we really try to meet them at eye level, both our crew, but also the mentors that are working with us. So we do not kind of position ourselves as experts that know it all with all the answers, but we let them to figure out, we act as kind of co-builders. We make sure that we take their ideas seriously, but we also do not sugarcoat it. We take them as the real entrepreneurs as they are. So there's a lot of freedom, yes, but there is also a clear process behind everything we do. So if somebody feels overwhelmed at first, which might be because, in a traditional education, you get an assignment and kind of clear steps to follow, there's a lot of freedom. You are an entrepreneur, you need to figure things out, but we will be there to offer the guidance and maybe, push you into the right, or not push you, but guide you into the right direction. So I would say lowering the barrier isn't just one thing. It's kind of a combination of a couple of small things. And the important thing is that the young people feel like they truly belong in that space. Some of them, they belong kind of for the first time as well. And that's, I think, the most important thing, yeah, to create this access.
I have actually had the pleasure of meeting one of your young innovators from Moonshot Pirates first time last year at the Blue Earth Summit. And I was just genuinely impressed at how passionate and mature and creative they were. I'm sure you have had the opportunity to work with so many amazing youth. And one of the things we would love to know is, can you please share with us the story of a young innovator from the Moonshot Pirates community whose journey has really deeply moved you or inspired you?
Absolutely. I mean, it's so difficult to pick just one. I actually have a screensaver with around like 100 faces, maybe even more from our community, just to remind myself and why we started all of this. But there is one story that really, stays with me and that we always share. It's one from Luke. He joined Moonshot Pirates when he was, I think, 15, 16. And he actually grew up in quite a tough environment, poverty, Northern Ireland. And when he joined Moonshot Pirates, he actually told us this was the first time he felt understood and he felt what ambition could look like. So it was for him not just about surviving his environment, but to actually, use his skills to build something that can create impact. And I think his sentence is like, Moonshot Pirates has changed the entire trajectory of my life. And today he has built and sold startups. He has become one of the most successful software engineers in Ireland. And, he works in startups while giving back to the community wherever he can. But really, as I said, Luke isn't an exception. There is, I don't know, Adrian from Austria. If you met him a few years ago, you would probably assume that he would end up as a corporate lawyer or consultant, which there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But like through Moonshot Pirates, something shifted for him. And he also realized he could use his skills and knowledge to not only build a profitable business, but to actually build, something that creates impact. And today, actually, what he's building, it's a startup called Meshara. And he is working on a problem of connecting the 2.6 billion people who are still offline. We have another girl, Anagha from India, who is building biocompute, where she's rethinking how we can store data sustainably, utilizing DNA, solving the energy crisis nowadays. We have Sebastião from Portugal, who is developing autonomous robots that plant trees after wildfires in steep areas. And, these are young people between 15, 24 from different countries experiencing different problems and challenging. But what is the common thread that they really have? These young people are taking, big problems in this world and they are turning them into opportunities. And that's something, that's moving me every day when I look at the community that we have worked with. And I'm sorry I didn't pick just one, but hard not to share.
We always say it's a bit like being asked to pick your favorite child. You can never have a favorite child. They're all your favorite. So I feel you. Kind of on the other side of the table, maybe. You touched on it earlier, and it's something that we've done with some of our programs as well. But you've got a global network of more than 400 experts and mentors all over the world. How have you gone about building this network? And why would you say it's kind of so critical or so important in building this really strong community, but also this cross-generational innovation ecosystem like you have at Moonshot Pirates?
Yeah, so honestly, it started very organically. In the beginning, we simply reached out to people we already knew from our network through TEDx, through our time in Silicon Valley, through our friends or former colleagues. So it was really word of mouth. And then we started to collaborate with companies on specific challenges. Like we had a mobility challenge with Volkswagen or a food challenge with Givaudan, and many of their employees joined as mentors. And then something really interesting happened. They kept coming back. So because, they realized that this mentorship is not really a one-way street, especially when you're working really with this next generation, you can say, or the new generation of young builders. So while the young people, learn from these experienced folks, these experienced mentors, the mentors also get fresh, ideas. They are asked both questions. They, interact with this generation that has completely new perspectives on how we work, build, or innovate. And many of these experts then tell us that they leave those sessions more inspired than actually the pirates do. So I really believe that this cross-generational exchange is critical to innovation. So, innovation doesn't happen in just one age group. If it does, it becomes very narrow. If we can build together with the next generation, I think that's where we get really special ideas. So for us, the mentors are super critical part of the entire ecosystem. The mentors bring the credibility, they bring the real world insights, and they really bring the access maybe that young people might not have. And in return, our mentors then get access to this rising talent that is out there, and maybe even to solutions or concepts that they might not see otherwise, especially because we have a community coming from over 160 countries. Like in our latest food challenge, actually, it was super interesting. Solutions started to pop up that nobody ever heard of, and they were super simple, just because there was a girl in India that discovered this like new plant that you can use as a protein that nobody ever heard of, but they use it on a daily basis. So yeah, for us, it's really what makes this community super special and work long term, because this mentorship, it doesn't really feel transactional, like that the mentors come and expect to be paid for. So all of them are doing it actually pro bono, but it really creates this feeling that everybody gains something out of this collaboration, out of those conversations. And that's I think truly meaningful for both of the groups.
I guess maybe just going back, as Will kind of just touched on right now, you've grown this incredible network. It's no easy task in growing a purpose-driven organization like Moonshot Pirates. What has been one of the most important kind of leadership lessons that you've learned whilst building Moonshot Pirates?
I think one of the biggest lessons is definitely to choose your team wisely. I mean, I'm working with my co-founder, who's also my husband, which makes things more interesting. So you really want to make sure that things work. But the entire team, in a purpose-driven organization, I believe skills do matter. But I also believe that values matter even more. You need people that challenge you, who think maybe differently, who push back, but who are also deeply, deeply aligned on what you're building here in the first place. And maybe the second lesson, I would say in terms of scaling, don't grow for the sake of growth, especially today. You can build a lot with a small and committed team. So bigger in terms of maybe team isn't always better. And yeah, in a nonprofit like ours, in our organization, what's super important to keep in mind is that things rarely go according to plan. So, with Moonshot Pirates, we started as a program-based organization. We run challenges, bootcamps, accelerators, mentorship programs, and they do work. But what we realized over time is that, when the programs end, the impact on those young people often fades. It often gets stalled, the idea stalled because the programs end, and that's not what we want. So that forced us to really ask again and again, was our goal to really run great programs long term, or do we rather want to create, somehow lasting pathways for young people to build real solutions? So for us currently at this stage where we are, that's where we are beginning to shift. So instead of running those isolated programs, what we want to build here is really a continuous ecosystem where learning, collaboration, mentorship, and even financial support kind of stays connected. So yeah, if you're building something purpose driven, really, you have to stay true to your values, but really be flexible around the model. So be clear on your why, but be flexible on the how, I would say.
And kind of building on that, we've touched on it a couple of times in the conversation so far, but how do you balance the kind of the ambition for building out the community and the business with sustainability, whatever kind of definition of sustainability we want to use in this instance, but for both the team, for you and Marco, and for the organization more broadly?
I might maybe take the aspect of more the financial sustainability, because like what we are doing here is already quite impactful. So I won't go into the other part of the sustainability at this moment. So it's not easy. I'm not going to pretend it is. The system often prefers the system. So, business usually gets funded more easily than like impact driven initiatives like ours. And as a nonprofit, simply financing is limited. So we have bootstrapped everything since the very beginning. Even though that we have this big vision, we need to take things step by step, and we work a lot through, partnerships, as I mentioned, with like corporations, organizations, foundations, because what we essentially want is really Moonshot Pirates to stay free for all the young people out there. That part is really non-negotiable for us. But at the same time, obviously, we need some financing in order to turn this bold vision that we have into self-sustaining ecosystems. So yeah, I would say it's step by step, partnership by partnership. Sometimes, it's super exciting. Sometimes it's quite frustrating and slow. But yeah, for me personally, the balance often comes from remembering why we started it all, right? So when things kind of feels a bit heavy, I go back to young people, schedule a couple of meetings with them, ask what they are building, ask what I can help, like go really back into, those conversations with them. And, those stories, those conversations really put me back on track.
It's really interesting, your perspective, and also kind of hearing already that kind of all that compassion and care really for the young people that you're working with. And I know you've described yourself before as, a mother and a human first. How would you say that motherhood has, shaped your leadership and approach to Moonshot Pirates?
Yeah, everything changed. Becoming a mom changed really everything. I think it made the work that we do much more personal. Before Theo, so his name is Theo, I was building Moonshot Pirates for the next generation, kind of in an abstract way. It didn't really have a face, but once my son was here, it suddenly had a face. So I constantly asked myself, what kind of world do I want him to grow up in? So, of course, for me, education matters a lot. That's also why me and my husband, we moved to South Africa so he can attend the green school here, which is a really nice concept. They also say that they raised the leaders of tomorrow that are more, compassionate and solution oriented. So education matters. But I also believe that skills matter, and what matters even more is courage, kindness, and taking action when something feels wrong. And let's be honest, this world really needs young people that care more. So yeah, I would say it shifted a lot in terms of leadership, probably also maybe softened it a little bit. So I feel like I approach people more with patience, because Theo definitely learned me some. I really don't rush things, but I still trust. I try to trust the process much more. So yeah, it really influenced also more how I see maybe the young people in our community. Don't try to like push them into the direction, but really ask the right questions and give them the space to discover which direction they want to go. So yeah, in many ways, so many ways. I could go probably for long, but let's maybe move to the next question here.
Yeah, and it's kind of a continuation of that and the previous discussion, looking at kind of staying positive in what feels like a fairly unpositive world these days, even though we have the pockets of sunshine. How are you, as a kind of a working partnership with your husband and your son, but also the kind of the global community that you have? How do you stay hopeful doing what you're doing when quite a lot of the challenges that we face collectively are just so hard to deal with at a systemic level?
So for me personally, I really try to stay hopeful by, I think, being intentional about what I consume in the first place. I am not a person who constantly watches the news, and it's not because I want to be ignorant or something like that. I mean, the news always gets to you one way or the other that is important, right? But for me, it's really because I can easily get overwhelmed by those news. Maybe since I became a mother, like I feel like I'm absorbing those things much more. So it really helps me to not being overwhelmed by those news. Instead, I choose to read books. I choose like long form articles. I try to follow people that challenge me and inspire me on different social media if I'm there already. And really, I try to understand things a bit more deeply rather than just reacting to headlines that might play with our amygdala and fear kind of base things. So yeah, I just focus, or I try to focus. It doesn't work every time perfectly, but I try to focus on what I can control. And I simply know that I can't solve every global crisis myself. But what I can do personally is to, help create opportunities for young people. I can focus on raising my son to grow up with strong values, and I can focus on bringing something, on building something meaningful in this world. So yeah. But honestly, like spending time with those Moonshot Pirates, with the young people, really keeps me hopeful and more optimistic, because like I see that there's a lot of young people, a new generation that cares, that builds solutions, and that is not giving up, and that's something that gives you a lot of energy.
Can completely agree. Yeah, and just saying to that theme of focusing on the positive, there's so many people around the world, that are doing their own parts to drive meaningful, positive change. Who for you is an innovation leader or a change maker that you think is really making a positive impact right now? What is it about their work that really inspires you or interests you?
So, that's also a tough one, but maybe a few people come to my mind, maybe also in different stages actually of my life. Like during my burnout phase that I mentioned at the beginning, when I was just starting to explore this impact entrepreneurship, space, I read the book by the founder of Tom's Shoes, Blake Mykuski. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. But that idea that a business can actually be built around impact, not just profit, really something shifted in me, because I studied international management marketing, typical business school, but we really never were talking about impact entrepreneurship. It's just weird. It should be talked about, right? And it made me realize that entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily need to be extractive, right? What he created was this one business model, which like originally provided a new pair of shoes to the person in need for every person that basically paid or bought the shoes. I think they later expanded to eyewear, glasses, and also some water initiatives, as far as I know. So I think that was kind of the first person that like I connected with like impact entrepreneurship or innovative models when it comes to impact entrepreneurship, which is kind of my field. But on the company side, obviously, I think everybody knows like Patagonia is amazing, right? Like when I hear the name, I don't necessarily hear a company that sells clothes. What I hear is, a purpose-driven, activist brand. And I'm not claiming, or I think they are not even claiming that they are completely perfect, but they are definitely transparent, and they are trying to change things from, I don't know, I think they are encouraging you to buy less because they have this repair services. They use upcycled, recycled, organic, renewable materials. So that's more on the company side things. And yeah, I'm sure I can find a couple of other people. Like recently, I finished actually a book from Naval Ravikant. It was a collection of his thoughts, not really a traditional book, but what stayed with me really was one line he mentioned in the book was, you should play long-term games with long-term people, kind of, and that's something I want to build, because I know that we can't build Moonshot Pirates on our own, and it's not a short-term project, right? It's a long-term game. So whether it's with our team or with our partners, with our community, and I believe like if you create trust, if you really show that you care, and if you build those relationships, this impact really compounds. So yeah, I would say that these are some of the people that inspire me.
We'll link some of these book recommendations in the description because there's some good ones in there. But thank you, Aneta. It's been awesome kind of getting to know you over the last half hour, 45 minutes. And thank you so much for kind of sharing your insights with us. What's next for you and the Moonshot Pirates team? How can listeners connect with, learn more, and support your work?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, both of you. Really a pleasure. Thank you for having me. What's next for us? I'm not sure if I mentioned it briefly, but what we are really doubling down is we are moving more from the programs to really building this ecosystem, something self-sustaining. We are also currently preparing our next Shape the Future challenge. This time we are focusing on AI, and the question of the challenge is really, what if the world's biggest sustainability challenges were tackled by young people using AI? We are aiming to bring around 2,500 young builders from around the world to build AI-powered solutions tackling climate, health, food, energy, and water issues. So that's very exciting. Otherwise, we are welcoming partners on both sides. We are also part of, and I think, I'm not sure you are also actually part of that, but we are part of the 1% for the Planet Foundation, which makes giving easier for companies. So if there are foundations, or corporate leaders who believe in the Youth Foundation, let's just youth-led innovation. Yeah, let's just talk. And if you're looking to support what we are building as individuals, you can also become part of our supporter crew, where your monthly contribution means that another young person can continue dreaming, building at no cost for them. So if you're curious, simply reach out to me on LinkedIn or just check out our website or our Instagram. And yeah, let's chat, reach out and become a pirate.
Amazing. Thank you so much again, Aneta. We'll definitely be sharing some of the links to your profile and to Moonshot Pirates, as well as the 1% team, so that you can support and that our listeners can learn more about all the amazing work that you're doing. Thank you so much again for joining us. We really enjoyed this session. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Innovation Brief.
So if you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe to Innovation Brief and leave us a review. It helps other innovation leaders and curious minds discover the show. So once again, this has been the Innovation Brief, and I've been Will Benton.
And I'm Gabby Hernandez. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.